Hi, I'm Christopher from FSR Climate, and we are here at the 2015 Forum of the European Environmental Evaluators Network. And here with me I have Juha Uitto, who is the Director of the Independent Evaluation Office of the Global Environmental Facility. Uitto, I prepared a couple of questions for you. First one, or could you just briefly say what is your organization doing?
Yeah, the Global Environment Facility is it's a financial mechanism to help developing countries to fund global environmental programs and projects, and we're also the financial mechanism for the UN Climate Change Convention and for other conventions such as the Biodiversity Convention. I'm heading the Independent Evaluation Office of the GEF. We are an internal evaluation office, but we are also an independent evaluation office in the sense that we report directly to the governing council consisting of the member countries. So we're not part of the management, we are from the outside looking in.
Okay, and I would like to concentrate a little bit on climate projects or strategies. What type of climate strategies are you evaluating? What is done right now?
Well, the GEF has been investing quite a lot of money, something like $7 billion over the past 20 years in both renewable energies and energy efficiency and energy systems for climate mitigation and also some money into climate adaptation, and this is all in developing countries. My office is not in charge of project evaluations because those are evaluated by the partner organizations that we are funding, but we are looking at the more higher level strategic things that the GEF does. So for example, quite recently we did an evaluation, an impact evaluation actually, of mitigation projects and programs funded by GEF in 4 major countries. So we had China, India, Mexico and Russia covered in that evaluation.
Okay, and can you, probably it's very difficult, but can you point out what makes a good project or a good strategy? Can you sum it up to some extent, or is it impossible? Is it just different for every?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? But yes, I think that we have to focus on systems and so on. So you can't just look into the direct emission reductions or emissions avoided as a result of an individual project, because these projects are intended to be demonstrations, they are intended to be pilots and so forth. So I think that what is important, how do you move countries and societies towards a low carbon economy? So you have to deal with policies, strategies, regulations, standards. Technology obviously is a very important aspect that comes there. But in general, you look into behavioral change and you look into market change. And how do you position climate projects in a society so that they produce these desired changes in a broader setting, and not just individually as a project focused on producing this output or that.
So you're trying to cover the bigger picture in a sense, so you're not focusing on particular projects but on the whole strategies on the whole.
Yeah, and I believe that the projects can only be successful if they are anchored in
a framework.
In the market change, behavioral change framework.
Mm-hmm. Coming back to the evaluation, you told us before that you are working as an independent evaluator also for other funds. I could imagine that in evaluating a strategy, for example, there are long-term perspective and short-term perspective. So it's not so clear sometimes. Maybe in the short run it has no effect, or it's not sufficient, or you won't like it. But in the long run, which we don't know by now, maybe it has an effect. How do you deal with this complexity?
No, I think it relates to what I said earlier about the systems perspective and the market change perspective and the institutional perspective. We also have to develop institutions in the countries. Now, the JEF, for example, is a very country-driven mechanism. So the projects and programs that the JEF funds are at the request by the governments. And so that's already a very good starting point, because it means that the governments and the countries want to change. So our role is to be catalytic and to help them to move towards the right path, so to say.
Then another question a little bit related is, with respect to the evaluation, how does scientific research or scientific results play a role in your evaluations? Are you reading the academic literature and trying to include that, or?
Yeah. I think that's very important. We have to, the JEF in general is supposed to be a science-based financial mechanism that uses the best practices and so forth. And the same with the evaluations. It's very important that we anchor the evaluations in the existing knowledge that comes from science and comes from research and so on. And so when we start the major evaluation, the first thing that we do, apart from setting the evaluation questions and the framework for the evaluation, the first thing is to do a literature review and to analyze what have previous evaluations, but not only evaluations, but also research said about these issues, because that helps you really to also to understand the evaluand, so to say, and to set your evaluation questions right.
Okay. Penultimate question is, you're also working as an independent evaluator, and you evaluate projects for funds. And so you probably sometimes say, okay, what you did, maybe nice intention, but it didn't work. Or how do they respond to your critique?
Yeah, that's always a fun part of the work, It's evaluators are seldom fully appreciated as partners. But that's where the beauty of being an independent office comes also, that we report to the funders and we report to the governing body, which consists of the government. So they have a clear interest in ensuring that the funds are well spent. I mean, the funds are limited, and we work in 150 countries, so there's a lot of competition for the funds. So the governing council appreciates the evaluations very much. When it comes to the other partners who implement the projects and develop the projects and so on, of course it gets sometimes a little bit tense when you say that they didn't achieve what they set out to achieve. But the way out of that is also, I believe, is to be rather consultative and participatory, not to sacrifice the independence and the rigor of the analysis, but you involve them and you tell them what you're doing and why you're asking certain questions, what methods are you using, what data are you using, and so then it's easier to get the buy-in even to negative findings.
I see. Final questions. We have the COPE in Paris soon. What are your expectations?
Well, what can you expect? I mean, apart from the general expectation that I hope that everything goes well and that they come up with a legally binding agreement and that it leads to actually to some implementation and action on the ground, I mean, that's the general expectation that I, and I'm sure everybody else here has. On the other hand, I also hope that they will think about evaluation and how do you build in evaluation into these processes, and not just monitoring the indicators and the targets, but actually using evaluation to understand what works, under what conditions, for whom, and so forth. That's my vested expectation.
Thank you very much for the interview, Juha.
Thanks very much indeed.